Welcome in, everybody. You are now listening to yet another episode of the Peace of My Mind podcast. I am your host, J. Scott Gatsby, and today we are recording at the 82nd Airborne Museum in Dreamville, North Carolina, of which I felt like was the perfect setting for the topic of today's discussion. Today, we will be discussing how far, or really how little progress America has made since its birth 250 years ago. In this episode, I will also be giving you a brief rundown of how we got here and the issues Uncle Sam has yet to resolve. With this review of America's failures to become something genuinely great, I hope to inspire fellow revolutionaries to bring needed change. So, no matter where you are or what you're doing, I invite you to ditch your American flag and join me for this mildly frustrating but much needed conversation. Let's begin. In July 1776, on this very plot of stolen native land, white slave owners in Philadelphia claimed that it was now the United States of America with the signing of the Declaration of Independence. A decade later, the U.S. contradiction was signed by another group of white slave owners speaking of ideals of liberty while practicing slavery, equality while denying rights for Africans, indigenous people, and women, as well as democracy while states constantly ignored federal law. At the turn of the 19th century, Napoleon Bonaparte's dreams of a French empire in the Western Hemisphere was killed along with thousands of his soldiers by the Haitians during the legendary Haitian Revolution, which forced him to sell the Louisiana Territory to the notorious racist rapist Thomas Jefferson. This deal nearly doubled the size of the country at the time. With the country rapidly expanding, the question of slave versus free states became too hot of an issue, and in 1861, a civil war erupted between the Union in the North and the other colonizers that hated black people just a little bit more in the South, known as the Confederates. After Abraham Lincoln reluctantly signed the Emancipation Proclamation just to keep people out of the fight for the United States against the Confederacy, he started the motion of pretending to abolish slavery, of which didn't genuinely happen and wasn't widely announced until June 19, 1865 in Galveston, Texas, of which we now celebrate it as Juneteenth. The loophole in the 13th Amendment allowing slavery states that if an individual is found guilty of a crime, they are subject to slave labor through convict lease agreements and privately owned prisons. The era of industrialization that came after the Civil War created an almost identical occupational landscape with the allocation of high-risk, low-wage jobs for minorities that proved little chance for advancement. To ensure the low socioeconomic status of primarily African Americans, Jim Crow laws were enacted in many southern states to discourage and debilitate all attempts made by black people to achieve prosperity. To be the United States, we sure have truly never had an instance of unity, even in warfare. In fact, during the First World War, black soldiers served in segregated units. Once over, black veterans were denied their rewards for their service, as well as returning home to a wave of racial violence against them, including lynchings, attacks, and the bombing of homes and churches by white domestic terrorists due to their racist fear of black advancement. Today, we can observe the ripple effects of this period by the concentrated black populations in the North and the West due to the great migration of black refugees escaping from white racial violence from the Black Belt in the southern United States. Racism didn't stop just there at causing what are truly the worst times in this country's history, because it was also a major factor in the Great Depression. White people were allowed to spend large, low-interest loans, as well as being allowed high limits on credit to buy items and stocks they couldn't afford up front. When they couldn't pay the banks back, most of these banks failed, and the deflation of U.S. currency gave rise to the rigid gold standard. FDR may have enacted the New Deal, but his efforts didn't end the Great Depression. That credit belongs to America's favorite pastime, warfare. The production needed to battle against the Axis powers is what truly got America back on its feet. In fact, FDR is largely responsible for redlining housing policies that affected primarily African Americans' abilities to afford quality homes. Not only this, it excluded many African Americans from Social Security due to their jobs in domestic and agricultural work, and also he refused to support anti-lynching laws to maintain support from Southern Democrats. During World War II, America once again failed to showcase true unity, with segregation and racism running rampant among both the military and on the home front. Black leaders organized black people into a double V campaign, fighting both fascism in the war abroad and racism in the war at home. The war ended with America killing more than 300,000 innocent Japanese civilians while displacing over 1 million more, with the first ever global showcase of nuclear weapons. Soon after this, the Civil Rights era began in the United States, seeing the dismantling of legal segregation, the securing of voting rights, and a national reckoning with racial inequality. Powerful ideals such as Black pride became widespread, along with a deeper focus on achieving social equity and advancement by way of obtaining a quality education. During this time, many revolutionary leaders cemented their legacies in history, such as Malcolm X, Ella Baker, and Martin Luther King Jr., amongst many others, by leading a driving force of which the Civil Rights Act was passed on July 2nd, 1964. At the beginning of the 21st century, America fell victim to an attack on U.S. soil, of which both towers of the World Trade Center were destroyed by hijacked planes. 2 additional planes were hijacked, with one landing in Pennsylvania and the other crashing into the Pentagon. This event would go on to reshape American security and motivate then President and war criminal George Bush to launch a war on terror. Fast forward to today, and arguably little to nothing has changed except for the technology we use and the way that we socialize as American citizens. The fashion trends have returned from previous generations, repackaged as something new. Many people are still surviving more than living due to inflation, and racism and classism are still the root causes of the majority of this country's biggest problems. From the beginning of this country's history, we can see many parallels between the past to the present. Just like the founding fathers were debating the true meaning of "we the people" during the signing of the U.S. contradiction, today we are still trying to figure out if the Constitution was ever meant to protect the rights of all American citizens, regardless of race, sex, class, or religion. The invention of the social constructs that are race and class still see to undermining the quality of life of everyone who is not white and or wealthy, due to the fact that wealth oftentimes comes from wealth, and educated individuals usually come from educated parents and families. The rich have only gotten richer as the middle class slowly shrinks, while the amount of poor people steadily rise due to socioeconomic and political inequalities. Nowadays, it's common for affluence to be symbolized by the showcase of frivolous spending, fueling the desires of the poor for more unnecessary products. These instances are regularly promoted on social media platforms by algorithms to generate more sales for businesses that feed off of trends. In the present day, it seems as if the Industrial Revolution is repeating itself. In today's society, we can observe many debates over AI automation replacing human labor, as well as the political power of growing tech companies. The issue closely resembles the labor struggles against the industrial monopoly in the 1890s. I would argue that it's even deeper of an issue nowadays because of the environmental damage that comes with the upkeep of new technologies and the invention of data centers. Since the popularization of AI, data centers have been introduced to many communities, of which the majority of these communities are impoverished and already suffering from failures in social policy. Just like the Great Depression, but now, ironically, the government is the culprit of massive spending. Compounded with inflation, the national debt, student loan forgiveness, and debates over universal health care have pushed financial tensions of American citizens to what seems like a breaking point. In the last 2 years, the ruling class has accrued an amount of wealth once thought impossible just a decade ago. This is possible due to the likes of white supremacists and capitalists such as Elon Musk worming their way into political office with the disgraceful re-election of the pedophile, rapist, and convicted felon that we know as Donald Trump back in into the presidency. As the ruling class has gotten exponentially richer, the middle class is continuing to shrink into non-existence. While this happens, the poor class is growing by the day due to the inflation of the price of homes, food, education, and healthcare. As the U.S. seemingly dives deeper into a recession, many people are asking the question of how are we going to recover from this deficit? The answer is once again America's favorite pastime, warfare. As of lately, Donald Trump has been more than entertaining the idea of a violent takeover of Greenland. This action has a potential to separate the U.S. from NATO or even disband it totally. Trump claims that the United States must procure the territory of Greenland because without it, there would be a hole left in our northern defense, despite the fact that Russia is a mere 2 hours away from the Alaskan border. And not only that, if we don't control Greenland, then Russia or China will. Trump is a specialist when it comes to fear-mongering and the spread of propaganda to make the population believe that the danger warrants his means of solutions. He has been able to get this far into such an irrational proposition due to the large following of anti-intellectual individuals he has as followers, and their loyalty, of which many debate is cult-like. America truly seems to be a changing same of a country concerning its inability to learn from the mistakes of the past and prevent them from recurring in the present. Even now, this country is plagued by systemic racism against African Americans and Spanish-speaking people. The power of white privilege has been revitalized in the dispersion of ICE to unlawfully capture and detain anyone that looks or sounds like they may be of Hispanic, Mexican, Latin, Spanish, or simply un-American, whatever that means, descent. The focus on these groups of people is a distraction away from the fact that our taxes are being used to pay for a genocide conducted by Israel in the Gaza Strip, and that's just one example. The news circulated in America consistently paints brown-skinned immigrants as dangerous people that deserve the vicious treatment the ICE agents have been subjecting these oftentimes American citizens to. A stark contrast from fighting against fascism in World War II to becoming the very face of fascism for the whole world to see, as well as the modern day terrorism that America once fought against, is what the current state of America seems to be. The only way out of these deeply rooted issues is to fight back against tyranny with the same viciousness that tyranny shows against us. Since 1776, this country has attempted to be a symbol of independence and freedom from the oppression of a colonial ruler that was the British. After 250 years, we as American citizens can now see that the effect of British rule has caused the American government to subject its citizens to the very same hardships that the British subjected early America to. From the invention of the social constructs that are race and class to denying access and opportunity for certain races to have the same access and opportunity to education, housing, healthcare, and working opportunities, as well as equal protection and rights under the law, has caused this country to evolve into something truly rotten. At the top of this situation, we have the ruling class making sure that no matter what happens, they profit from the growing poverty of the shrinking middle class into the poor. To keep all the victims of oppression distracted, fear is seeded in the news of the mythical criminality of immigrants, of which this country would not exist without. The country that was once known as a global superpower against fascist and oppressive rule has become the very same imperialist terrorist that it once fought against. It took 250 years for us to get to this point, and the only question that I have now is how long it will take us to get out of this mess. Thank you so much for tuning in for yet another episode of the Peace of My Mind podcast. I appreciate all of you because y'all never fall short with the love you have for me. If you do have a little more to spare, as always, I would deeply appreciate a like if you enjoyed the episode and a comment below to let me know how you feel about the issue. Don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date with the latest episodes and other content. And until next time, stay peaceful with love.